At table 9, closest to the railing, Tiana Okafor sat completely alone with a plate of grilled sea bass and a small bunch of daisies she'd bought herself that morning. 2 tables over, Emmanuel was laughing. He was doing the laugh he'd perfected in college, the one that made sure everyone in a 30-foot radius knew he was having the time of his life. Beside him, Delilah had her phone up, filming, because Delilah filmed everything, and today she'd told 3 separate people she was going to capture something special. She actually came back here, Emmanuel was saying not quietly, to our restaurant on Girlfriend's Day, alone. Delilah snorted into her champagne. And Tiana, 26, in a tailored chocolate brown blazer top cinched at the waist with soft draped folds and wide burnt orange trousers, her dark bob streaked with deep wine red, did not turn around. She cut her fish. She ate it. She had promised herself she would not turn around, and she was very good at keeping promises to herself. She'd had a lot of practice. Then the shadow reached the shore. A waiter stopped mid-step with a tray still balanced on his fingertips. A little girl at the family table pointed and said, "Mommy, look at the boat." Except it wasn't a boat. It was a yacht. Black and gold, longer than the restaurant itself, gliding into the private marina without a sound, like the water was trying not to wake it. The kind of vessel that shows up in the background of news stories about people who own countries. Phones came out everywhere now, not just Delilah's. That's gotta be a celebrity. No, royalty. That's royal money. That's a president's boat. Even Emmanuel stopped laughing. He half stood, one hand shading his eyes because a man like Emmanuel could smell status from across a harbor, and he wanted a closer look. The yacht settled. Silence rolled off it like cold air off ice. And then the entire side of the hall lit up. An LED display 3 stories tall. Glowing gold letters resolving one at a time against the black. Happy Girlfriend's Day. The restaurant made a sound. 400 people leaning forward at once. The letters held, then faded. Then a single word bloomed in their place, bigger than all the rest. Tiana. Nobody breathed. The violinist mid-note let the note die. Somewhere near the bar, a fork hit a plate and nobody flinched, because nobody could look away from the giant glowing name floating over the water. A woman near the front whispered it out loud, confused. Who's Tiana? Who's Tiana?
That's a person.
Is that a person or a boat name? Someone else murmured. That's a person, a third voice hissed. You don't put a boat's own name on the side in lights. That's for somebody. For who, though? And slowly, table by table, head by head, a whole restaurant turning like one nervous animal, every single person began to look away from the yacht, and looked one by one at the woman eating alone by the railing with a bunch of grocery store daisies. Tiana set down her fork. She looked just as shocked as everyone else, maybe more. Her lips parted, her eyes went to the glowing letters, then to the crowd staring at her, then back to the letters, and her hand came up to her chest like she was checking her own heartbeat was still running. Emmanuel's face did something complicated. Delilah's phone slowly lowered. But before I tell you why, the largest private yacht on the entire coast showed up carrying her name in lights. I have to tell you why Tiana almost didn't leave her apartment that morning. Because 3 years ago, in this exact restaurant, at this exact table, with this exact violinist playing, someone made her a promise, and then he broke it in the cruelest way a person can. I'm Tiana. What's your name? Tell me in the comment section below. I'll love to give a shout out personally. Let's go back. Tiana Okafor was the kind of person who remembered your coffee order after meeting you once. She taught 4th grade at an underfunded school on the east side of the city, the kind of school where the copier was always broken and half her supply money came out of her own pocket. On weekends, she volunteered at a community center teaching kids to read. If you asked her students to describe her, they'd say she laughed loud, she never yelled, and she kept granola bars in her desk for the kids who came to school hungry. You give too much, her best friend Renata told her once, watching Tiana hand a stranger her umbrella in the rain and jog to her car, soaked to the skin. One day it's gonna run you dry, T. People take. That's what people do. Not everybody, Tiana said, wiping rain off her face, grinning. And anyway, one day it comes back around. Comes back around. Renata rolled her eyes. You've been saying that since we were 19. When's it gonna come back around for you? I don't do it to get it back. I know. That's exactly why it never comes back. Renata sighed. Get in the car. You're gonna catch pneumonia being a good person. She believed it, though. That was the thing about Tiana. Everybody teased her for it, but she actually believed that what you put into the world finds its way home. She'd built a whole life on that one quiet faith, and life had spent 3 years testing it. 3 years ago, in that same restaurant by the ocean, with the same violinist and the same gold sunset melting into the same water, Emmanuel had gotten down on one knee. She'd cried. Of course she'd cried. She'd thought this place would be hers forever now. The place where the best thing that ever happened to her happened. They set a date. She picked flowers. She started a little notebook of everything she wanted their life to look like. And then, 4 months before the wedding, Emmanuel sat her down at a coffee shop and folded his hands like a man about to return a defective appliance. I've done a lot of thinking, he said. Okay. She'd smiled. She'd actually smiled, thinking he was nervous about seating charts. And I need to be somewhere in 10 years that you can't take me. The smile faded. What does that mean? It means... He turned his coffee cup a quarter turn. I've been offered something, a real something. And it comes with expectations. Emmanuel, what are you saying to me? And then he explained it calmly, like a man reading terms of a contract, which she'd replay in her head for months afterward. The humiliation of sitting there while he explained why he was leaving. Delilah's father owned a chain of luxury hotels. Delilah's father golfed with men whose names were on buildings. Emmanuel had an opportunity, and the opportunity had a daughter, and the daughter wanted Emmanuel. So that's it, Tiana had said. Her voice hadn't even shaken, which surprised her. You're leaving me for a resume. Don't make it ugly. You made it ugly, Emmanuel. I'm just saying it out loud. She'd looked at the ring on her own finger. Was any of it real? The proposal, this place, the ocean? It was real then. He'd said it like that was supposed to comfort her. It's not that you weren't enough, Tiana. It's that you weren't strategic. There it was, the sentence. He didn't leave because she was too little. He left because she wasn't a shortcut. She'd taken the ring off at the table and set it down next to his coffee, quietly, and walked out and made it exactly to her car before she came apart. The breakup didn't just break her heart. It broke something quieter. She stopped celebrating things. Her birthday came and she let it pass. Renata threw her a dinner and she smiled through it and went home early. For 3 years, Tiana, who used to decorate her apartment for holidays that didn't even have decorations, celebrated nothing. Until this year, she was standing in her kitchen on the morning of what would have been a couple's holiday, staring at a coffee mug, when her phone lit up. Renata. Okay, don't lie to me, Renata said the second she picked up. What are you doing today? Laundry. Tiana. Grading papers. Maybe a documentary about whales. It's Girlfriend's Day, and you're gonna sit in that apartment and watch whales? Tiana leaned against the counter. It's not a real holiday, Ren. Some card company made it up. So, some card company made up a reason for you to treat yourself, and you're too stubborn to take it. A pause. Babe, it's been 3 years. 3. When's the last time you did one nice thing just for you? No strings, nobody attached. Tiana opened her mouth to answer and realized she couldn't remember. That silence said more than anything either of them could have. That's what I thought, Renata said softer now. Go somewhere pretty. Buy yourself something. Look good doing it. You don't need a man on the other side of the table to deserve a nice meal tea. You just need you. They hung up. Tiana stood in her kitchen for a long minute, staring at the coffee mug, and then she heard herself say it out loud to the empty room. If nobody's gonna celebrate me, then I'll celebrate me. She said it like a dare. Then, before she could talk herself out of it, she grabbed her keys and on impulse, the good blazer. The chocolate brown one with the sharp shoulders that she'd bought 2 years ago and never had a reason to wear. Today she'd make a reason. The flower stand on the corner had daisies for $6 a bunch. Tiana picked them up, turned them in the light, and brought them to the old man in the register. Ah, he said, wrapping them in brown paper. Lucky boyfriend. She laughed, soft, a little surprised at herself. No, lucky me. He looked at her for a second, then handed her a second bunch. This one's on me. You don't have to. I know I don't. He winked. That's what makes it nice. Remember that. Remember how easily kindness moves between people who don't owe each other anything. It's going to matter more than you think. She drove to the coast with the windows down and the daisies on the passenger seat where a person should have been. Her phone buzzed at a red light. Renata again. Renata. Proof of life. Picture. Now. Renata. I mean it, or I'm driving out there. Tiana propped the daisies up against the window, snapped a photo of them with the ocean in the background, and sent it. Renata. Okay, Miss Independent Renata. Those flowers hit different when you buy them yourself, huh? Tiana. They really do. Renata, proud of you. Now eat something expensive and tip well. Love you, Tiana smiled at the phone longer than she meant to. Then the light turned green, and she told herself she wasn't nervous. And she was lying. The restaurant was exactly as beautiful as she remembered, which was the problem. The host led her past the same tables, the same railing, the same view of the same ocean, and she felt the old ache press against her ribs like a bruise you forgot you had until someone hugs you. Table for? The host asked, pen ready. One, Tiana said. He paused just slightly. Will someone be joining you? She looked out at the water. The sun was starting its slow slide down. Hopefully, she said, peace. The host, to his credit, smiled like he understood and gave her the best table by the rail. She ordered one meal, one glass of white wine. She propped the daisies against a little vase in the center of the table so they'd have the view too. The waiter, young, earnest, and came back with her wine and hesitated. Can I say something? And it's not weird? Depends how weird, Tiana said. I've worked here 2 years. Most people who come alone spend the whole time on their phone, like they're embarrassed to be seen by themselves. He set the glass down. You're just looking at the ocean. It's nice. Yeah, that's all. Tiana felt something warm move through her chest. Thank you. You want me to check back or leave you to it? Leave me to it, she said, smiling. I'm on a date. He grinned. Best kind, low maintenance. And for about 11 minutes, it was perfect. For about 11 minutes, Tiana Okafor sat by the ocean and remembered that she was actually pretty good company. She thought about her students. She thought about Renata. She thought for the first time in a long time that maybe the worst of it was behind her, that maybe she'd finally gotten to a place where the old table by the railing was just a table. Then a voice she'd know anywhere said, Tiana, with that fake little upward lilt of surprise. And 11 minutes was all she got. Emmanuel stood 3 feet away in a linen shirt with too many buttons open, doing his best impression of a man who couldn't believe his luck. No way, he said, of all the places. Delilah appeared at his elbow like she'd been waiting in the wings for a cue. She hugged him, a big, theatrical, look-at-us hug, and let her hand rest on his chest. Babe, who's this? Delilah asked, though she knew exactly who this was. She'd made Emmanuel show her photos. This is Tiana, Emmanuel said warmly. Old friend. Old friend. Tiana felt a 1 land, 3 years, a ring, a notebook full of a life they were supposed to build. And she'd been demoted to old friend, like a co-worker he'd lost touch with. We were literally just looking for a table, Delilah said, scanning the packed restaurant, landing and surprise on the 2 empty seats directly beside Tiana's. Oh, perfect. There's a whole open section by the bar, Tiana offered, but the view is here, Delilah said, already pulling out a chair. They sat. Of course they sat. Now here's a small thing you should know about people like Emmanuel. They never bump into you by accident. They rehearsed the accident. He checked. He knew she came here on this day. He'd bet a whole afternoon on the idea that watching her sit alone would feel good. And the scary part? For about 10 minutes, he was right. So, Emmanuel said, draping an arm over Delilah's chair, you're still coming here, huh? Food's good, Tiana said. It is, he agreed, nodding slowly, sympathetically, like she'd just admitted something sad. It's just, a lot of memories in this place. He glanced at Delilah. For me too, honestly, but we're making new ones. Delilah beamed and squeezed his hand. How's the teaching? Emmanuel asked in the tone of a man asking a retired athlete how the knee's holding up. Still at that little school on the east side? Still there. That's great. That's really... He searched for the word, the steady of you. He smiled. Me and Delilah just got back from Santorini. Her dad's opening a property out there. You should see the water. I'm sure it's beautiful. It is. He waited, clearly hoping she'd ask a follow-up so he could keep going. Tiana took a sip of her wine and said nothing, because she'd learned a long time ago that Emmanuel got his energy from your reaction, and the fastest way to starve him was to give him nothing to eat. She looked out at the ocean instead. The water was doing that thing where the light sat gold on top of the dark, and for a second she just let herself have it. The problem with giving Emmanuel nothing is that Delilah was hungrier than he was. Wait, Delilah said, loud enough that the next table turned. Are you here, alone, on Girlfriend's Day? She said it with her hand pressed to her chest, eyes wide, like she'd discovered something tragic. That is actually so sad, Delilah went on. Like, I'm not being mean, I just feel bad. You don't have to feel bad, Tiana said. No, but I do, though. Delilah leaned in with the fake gentleness of a woman twisting a knife and calling it a hug. Like my mom always says, a woman alone on a holiday is a woman who missed her window. And you're what, 26, 27? She tilted her head. You've still got a little time. I'm not in a hurry, Tiana said. That's such a healthy way to look at it, Delilah cooed. Did you at least bring a book? Or are you just sitting? She gasped softly, like a new tragedy had occurred to her. Wait, did you buy yourself flowers? Tiana's hand moved just slightly toward the daisies. She stopped it. They're cute, Delilah said, in a voice that meant the opposite. A very craft store. A couple at the next table pretended not to hear and heard everything. The silence stretched, hot and awful. Tiana looked at the daisies in the little vase. She thought about the old man at the flower stand. Lucky me. I'm okay, she said quietly. Of course you are, Delilah said, patting the air near Tiana's shoulder. You're so strong. If you've ever been the person somebody called strong, just so they could feel better about hurting you, and go ahead and put a comment down below. One word, just say here. I want to know how many of us there are, then stay with me, because this table is about to flip in a way nobody at that restaurant is ready for. Emmanuel raised a hand and waved the violinist over. Hey, can you play something for us? That slow one. He hummed 2 bars. The violinist, who had no idea what he was walking into, nodded and lifted the bow. Tiana's stomach dropped before the first note even landed, because she knew that hum. It was their song, the one that had played 3 years ago, right here, when he got down on one knee at this exact table, by this exact railing. He knew she'd know. That was the whole point. Oh, I love this one, Delilah said, swaying. Is this special to you guys? It's just a nice song, Emmanuel said, but he was watching Tiana when he said it, watching for the flinch. The first notes drifted out over the ocean, and Tiana felt her throat close like a fist. She kept her eyes on the horizon. She would not cry in front of him. She had promised herself that in the car, and Tiana Okafor kept her promises to herself. She let exactly 1 tear fall, caught it before it reached her jaw, and picked her fork back up. No argument, no scene. Just a buried woman finishing her dinner, while a man played a knife across an old wound and called it music. He wanted her to break right there, at the table, in front of everyone. He built the whole afternoon around that one crack in her face, and he almost got it. But here's what Emmanuel didn't know, sitting there so pleased with himself. The ocean behind him had already started to move. Help was already on the water. He just couldn't see it yet. A waiter arrived with a bottle of champagne, compliments of the gentleman. He set down a single flute in front of Tiana, empty, and a folded note. She opened it. To memories. A ripple of laughter moved through the nearby tables. Someone actually said, "Oh," like a crowd at a boxing match. Emmanuel lifted his own glass toward her in a little mock toast, all warmth, all teeth. For old times. Tiana set the note down, face up, so anyone who wanted to read it could. You know what's funny, she said, and her voice was so even it made him blink. You sent me an empty glass to remind me I'm alone, but you had to bring an audience just to feel full. She picked up her own wine. One of us needs a crowd to enjoy dinner. It's not me. Emmanuel's smile stalled for half a second, and then Delilah stood up, because if Tiana was going to have a spine, Delilah was going to make sure the whole restaurant watched her step on it. She tapped her glass with a ring until it chimed. gathering the room, because Delilah had never in her life let a moment go by without an audience. "I just want to make a little toast," she announced, glowing. "To love, to second chances." She raised her champagne high. "To women who get chosen." She let that sit. Then she looked directly down at Tiana, tilted her head, and finished. "And to the women who don't." The restaurant clapped. Not everyone, but enough. Enough that it filled the air and pressed down on the one small table by the rail where a woman sat with her homemade bouquet and her single glass of wine. "To the women who don't," Delilah repeated, softer, just for Tiana, and sat back down, satisfied. Tiana lowered her eyes to her plate. Her hand found the stem of one daisy under the table and held it like an anchor. "Lucky me," she told herself. He said, "Lucky me." She held onto that sentence like it was the only solid thing in the room. She had no way of knowing that in about 90 seconds, every single person applauding that toast would be too stunned to remember they'd ever done it. Delilah just raised a glass to the women who don't get chosen. Keep your eyes on the water behind her. And that exact second, with the applause still crackling, was when the light on the ocean started to change. Because the universe has a sense of timing, and it is petty. A seagull, enormous, entitled, built like a feathered linebacker, dropped out of the sky, banked hard over the railing, and snatched Emmanuel's ribeye clean off his plate mid-toast. "Hey!" Emmanuel lunged too late and knocked his own water into his lap. The restaurant's clapping turned into something else entirely. A second gull, seeing the operation succeed, went for Delilah's breadbasket. She shrieked, a real one, a horror movie one, and swatted at the air, and her champagne flute went flying and shattered on the deck. "Get it away from me! Emmanuel, do something!" Emmanuel, soaked, flapping a napkin at a bird twice as committed as he was, did not look like a man building a strategic future. Tiana pressed her lips together. She lost. A laugh escaped her, bright and real, the first honest sound she'd made all day. And a few other people laughed too. With her, this time, not at her. "It's not funny," Delilah snapped, still swatting at the air. "It's a little funny," Tiana said. Emmanuel shot her a look, dabbing champagne off his collar. "You think this is funny?" "I think," Tiana said, picking up her fork, "that the bird had better manners than most of the people at this table." Somebody 2 tables over laughed out loud and didn't try to hide it. For about 5 seconds, the whole thing felt survivable. Then the music stopped. Not because anyone told it to. People notice light before they notice anything else. It's older than language, that instinct. The sky changes and your body knows before your brain does. The water dimmed. Service stopped mid-stride, plates in hand. Conversations died halfway through sentences. The little girl at the family table stood up on her chair and pointed with her whole arm. "Mommy! Mommy, look!" And the shadow came. It slid across the marina, slow and total, and 400 people turned toward the ocean at the same time and watched a black and gold mega yacht, the length of a city block, glide toward the private dock without a single sound. No engine roar, no horn, just this vast, elegant, impossible thing arriving like it had always been coming, and they'd only just now earned the right to see it. The restaurant owner came out of the back, wiping his hands on his apron, took one look and went pale. "No," he said softly. "No, that can't be here. That yacht doesn't dock anywhere." Nobody knew whose it was. Nobody, that is, except one person in that entire restaurant. And she was still sitting alone at table 9, staring at the water like everyone else, her fork frozen halfway to her mouth, having absolutely no idea it was there for her. The yacht stopped. The silence was so complete you could hear the water lapping against the hull. And then the entire side of it lit up. Happy Girlfriend's Day. Gasps, real ones, a wave of them across the deck. The letters faded, and in their place, 3 stories tall in glowing gold. Tiana. A fork clattered onto a plate somewhere near the bar, and nobody looked to see whose. The little girl on the chair turned to her mother and asked in the loud, clear voice of a 6-year-old, "Mommy, is Tiana a princess?" And her mother, staring at the yacht, whispered honestly, I don't think so, baby." Emmanuel's wine glass slipped out of his hand and rolled off the table. Delilah's phone, still recording, slowly lowered until it was pointed at the deck, filming nothing but her own feet. And every single face in that restaurant turned, once more, toward the woman with the daisies. Except this time, nobody was laughing. Tiana's lips moved. No sound came out. She looked at the glowing letters spelling her name across $200 million of steel and gold, and she thought, with the strange calm of total shock, there must be another Tiana. There was not another Tiana. A gangway extended from the yacht to the dock with a soft mechanical hum. No army came down it, no bodyguards in black, no entourage. Just one elderly man in a crisp white captain's uniform, moving carefully, one hand on the rail. He walked the length of the dock, up the restaurant steps, and stopped a respectful distance from table 9. Then he bowed, a full formal bow from the waist. "Miss Tiana Okafor," he said, and his voice carried in the silence. "Chairman Jagal Yunho requests your permission to greet you." Permission. The restaurant owner, several tables away, made a strangled sound and started sprinting toward table 9 to do something, to be near the important thing, to fix his hair, and caught his foot on his chair leg and went down flat across an empty table, taking a bread basket with him. "I'm fine," he announced from the floor. "Everyone, I'm fine." A nervous laugh cracked through the crowd. It broke the spell just enough for everyone to breathe. Tiana looked at the captain. Her mouth was dry. I think there's a mistake," she managed. I don't know a chairman. I don't know anyone with a..." She gestured helplessly at the yacht. "What with that?" "There is no mistake, Miss Okafor," the captain said gently. "He's quite certain. But I've never... Miss Okafor." The old captain's eyes were kind and a little wet. "I have worked for the chairman for 11 years. In 11 years, I have never once seen him do a thing like this for anyone. When he told me where we were sailing today, I asked him if he was sure." A small, warm smile. He said, "For her, I've never been more sure of anything." Behind Tiana, Delilah had gone very quiet. Emmanuel's mouth was open and nothing was coming out. And then a second figure appeared at the top of the gangway. Now everyone in that restaurant expected sunglasses, gold watches, a man who arrives like a headline. Watch what actually walks down that dock. Jagal Yunho came down the gangway without hurrying. He was tall, broad through the shoulders, with black hair pushed back off a sharp, calm face and dark eyes that didn't scan the crowd for approval, didn't scan the crowd at all. He wasn't in a tuxedo. He was in a simple cream linen suit, open at the collar, no tie, sleeves that showed the edges of dark tattoos winding down toward his hands. Old ink, intricate, the kind that means something. He didn't look at the celebrities pretending not to stare. He didn't look at Emmanuel, soaked in water and champagne. He didn't look at the yacht that everyone else couldn't stop looking at. He looked at exactly one thing. He walked the length of that restaurant, past the ice bucket, past the frozen violinist, past 400 people holding their phones in their breath, and he stopped at table 9. And the first thing he did was look at the little $6 bunch of daisies propped against the vase. Something in his face softened and grieved at the same time. You weren't supposed to buy those yourself, he said quietly. Tiana stared up at him. "I'm sorry. Do I know you?" He didn't answer that, not yet. Instead, he reached out gently and lifted her daisies from the vase, cradling them like they were worth more than everything floating in the marina. He turned and handed them to the captain, who received them with both hands and another small bow, as if he'd been given something precious. Then Jagal reached inside his jacket and produced a bouquet, enormous, impossible, a cascade of white peonies, still cool from the yacht's cold storage. Tiana's whole body went still. White peonies, her favorite flower. The one she'd never told a single person at that restaurant. The one she barely told anyone, because who asks and who remembers? "How?" she whispered. It wasn't even a question. It was the only word she had left. Jagal Yunho looked at her, and for the first time, the corner of his mouth moved. "Because someone who pays attention," he said, "remembers." He didn't sit. He crouched, so they were eye to eye, and he set the peonies gently on the table between them. Happy Girlfriend's Day, Tiana, he said. Not my girlfriend, not mine. Just her name, offered like a gift and not a claim. I don't understand, she said, and her voice finally cracked. I've never met you. I'd remember you. She gestured at him. The tattoos, the calm, the whole impossible fact of him. You're not exactly forgettable. The corner of his mouth moved again. I get that a lot. So how do you know my name? How do you know my flower? How do you... She pressed her fingers to her forehead. I'm a school teacher. I have $40 in my checking account until Friday. Men like you don't... This doesn't happen. It's happening, Geondal said gently. And the reason you don't remember me is simple. You weren't looking at yourself the day our lives crossed. You were looking at her. Her. Geondal was quiet for a moment. The whole restaurant leaned in, and he didn't seem to notice or care. 8 months ago, he said, there was an accident on 5th and Marin. A woman got clipped by a car turning a left and went down hard in the crosswalk. It was raining. People had places to be. Cars went around her. He paused. One person didn't go around her. Tiana's hand rose slowly to her mouth. You knelt down in the rain in your work clothes, he said. You held her head out of the water. You called the ambulance. When she was cold, you gave her your coat. When she was scared, you told her a story about your 4th grade class until she stopped shaking. You bought a bag of groceries she'd dropped and set it by her so she wouldn't worry about it. And then when the paramedics came, you didn't wait around for anyone to thank you. You had somewhere to be. He tilted his head. You had a reading class, 12 kids. You didn't want to be late for 12 kids. Tears were running freely down Tiana's face now, and she wasn't wiping them. That woman, Geondal said, and his own voice was not entirely steady, is the only family I have left in this world. She raised me alone. She worked 3 jobs so I could have one good one. He looked down at the peonies. She came home that night soaked to the bone, and she couldn't stop talking about the girl in the crosswalk with the wine-red hair who gave away her coat and never asked for a name. She said, Yun-ho, that girl is going to give herself away to the wrong people because she doesn't know what she's worth. How is she? Tiana asked. The question came out before anything else. Before how did you find me? Before why the yacht? The woman, is she okay? Geondal went quiet. Of every possible thing she could have said, that was the one he hadn't prepared for. The fact that her first instinct, sitting in front of a stranger in a $200 million yacht with her name on it, was to ask after a woman she'd met once in the rain. She's okay, he said, and something in his throat caught. She's better than okay. She asks about you every week. Did you find the crosswalk girl yet? For 8 months. He almost laughed. You have no idea how hard it is to find someone who doesn't want to be found. You didn't leave a name. You didn't file a report. You gave a paramedic a fake number so nobody would call you a hero. It wasn't fake, Tiana said. I fat-fingered it. I was late for my kids. 12 kids, Geondal said. Reading circle. I know the whole thing now. He shook his head. You want to know how I found you? A florist? My mother remembered you said your favorite flower when she asked why you weren't scared, holding a stranger in the rain. You said white peonies remind you that soft things survive. Tiana pressed her hand flat against her mouth. I called every florist in a 40-mile radius, Geondal said, and asked which ones had a regular who bought white peonies for herself. One shop remembered a teacher. He looked at the daisies in the captain's arms. So when I heard you were spending today alone, buying your own flowers again, I decided the whole ocean was going to know your name before dinner was over. He gestured, not at the yacht, but past it, at nothing, at everything. This isn't a reward, Tiana. You can't reward a person for being who they are. It insults them. His voice dropped. This is just the loudest way I could think of to make 400 strangers finally look at you the way you deserve to be looked at. One time. So the next time somebody tells you that you're sad for eating alone, his eyes flicked just once toward Delilah. You'll remember what it felt like to have the sun blocked out on your behalf. The restaurant was dead silent. Somewhere quietly, a woman at a nearby table had started to cry too. Emmanuel, wet, deflated, forgotten for a full 4 minutes, which for Emmanuel was an eternity, could not stand it anymore. He stood up. Okay, this is a nice little show, he said, forcing a laugh, wiping champagne off his sleeve. But come on, nobody just shows up with a yacht for a school teacher. This is staged. What is this, some kind of ad? Who set this up? Jagal Yunho rose to his full height slowly and turned to look at Emmanuel for the first time. He studied him the way you'd study a stain you weren't going to bother removing, and then Jagal did the last thing anyone expected. He said, "Thank you." Emmanuel blinked. "What?" "Thank you," Jagal repeated evenly. "Truly, I've been trying to think of how to say it since I got here." He glanced at Tiana, then back at Emmanuel. "If you had been even a slightly better man, if you had appreciated her, protected her, seen a single thing that was right in front of you, she would be sitting across from you tonight, and I would have spent the rest of my life never knowing your name." He let that sink into the silence. "You threw away the most valuable thing you will ever touch," Jagal said, without heat, without threat. "And you were too small to even feel the weight of it leave your hands. So, thank you, genuinely. You did me the greatest favor of my life. No violence, no shouting, no bought-out restaurant, no security dragging anyone away. Just the truth," said plainly, in front of everyone Emmanuel had brought here to witness his victory. It was so much worse than a threat. Delilah slowly turned to look at Emmanuel. "You told me she left you," she said quietly. "Delilah, you said she left you, Emmanuel." Her voice was climbing. "You said she was jealous and clingy and you had to end it. That's the story you told my whole family." It's more complicated than, is it?" Delilah looked from Emmanuel, soaked and small in his chair, to Tiana, standing straight with a bouquet of white peonies and a man who'd blocked out the sun for her. And for the first time, she wasn't looking at Emmanuel like a prize. She was looking at him like a receipt, like a woman doing the math on exactly what kind of man throws away a person like that for a hotel connection, and what that math said about the man sitting next to her, and what it said about her. "I need some air," Delilah said, and stood and walked away from the table without him. Emmanuel didn't follow. He didn't have anything. For once in his life, the man with a comment for everything had nothing at all. He looked up at Tiana, one last time, some old plea surfacing in his face. "Tiana, come on, you know me. Tell them who I did know you," Tiana said. Calm, almost kind. That was the problem. And she turned her back to him. The restaurant manager appeared at Tiana's side, breathless, having recovered from his fall and his dignity in roughly equal measure. "Miss Okafor," he said, bowing so low his tie touched the table. "Your private deck is prepared. Whenever you're ready." The whole restaurant had assumed the restaurant was the destination. It wasn't. The yacht was. The violinist, bless him, quietly packed up his violin, walked to the dock and boarded. The head chef untied his apron, folded it, and followed. One by one, the things that made an evening beautiful got up and walked toward the water, because tonight they were going where she was going. Jagal offered Tiana his hand. He didn't take hers. He didn't reach out and pull her toward the life he'd built. He simply held his hand open, palm up, and waited, the way you wait for someone you respect to make her own choice. Tiana looked at the hand. She looked at the daisies now cradled in the captain's arms, and the peonies on the table, and the giant glowing letters of her own name over the ocean. "I want to ask you something," she said, "and I want the real answer." "Okay." "If your mother had never gotten hurt that day, if none of this had happened, would we have ever met?" Jagal considered it, honestly, the way he considered everything. "No," he admitted. "You'd have never let a man like me near you. You'd have taken one look and crossed the street." A pause. "But she did get hurt. And you didn't cross the street. You knelt down in it. So I don't spend a lot of time on the version where we don't meet. I like this one too much." Tiana let out a breath that was half a laugh. "The daisies stay," she said. "I bought those myself. I'm keeping those." "The daisies stay," he agreed. "Wherever you go, they go." Then she picked up the peonies, stood on her own, and put her free hand in his. She chose it. They walked toward the gangway together, and as she stepped aboard, the sky over the marina bloomed, not with the loud, aggressive fireworks of a man showing off, but with soft, elegant gold sparks unfolding quietly over the water, one after another, like the evening exhaling. For the first time in 3 years, Tiana Okafor laughed without forcing it. Head back, real, loud enough to carry across the water. The yacht turned, slow and silent, and began to sail into the last of the sunset. Up on the deck, wrapped in a blanket a steward had draped over her shoulders, Tiana watched the shoreline shrink. "Can I be honest?" she said. "Please. This is insane, you know that, right? This is completely insane. I helped a woman in a crosswalk. People do that. That's a normal thing a person does." "It should be," Geondal said. "It isn't. 22 people walked around my mother that day. I counted the security footage, 22. You were number 23. He looked out at the water. "The other 22 aren't bad people. They were just busy or scared or in a hurry. That's most people, most of the time. You're the thing that's rare, Tiana. You just grew up around yourself, so you think it's ordinary." She was quiet for a moment. "My friend Renata's gonna lose her mind," she finally said. "She literally told me this morning to go do one nice thing for myself. She sounds smart. She's gonna take full credit for this yacht." Geondal laughed, and a real one, surprised out of him. "Then I owe Renata a fruit basket." "A big one. The biggest," he agreed. Then his phone buzzed. He answered it, listened for a moment, and for the first time all evening, his calm face changed. Just slightly. Just enough. The captain, standing nearby, asked quietly, "Chairman, should I turn the yacht around?" Geondal looked back toward the distant restaurant, where a small figure that was unmistakably Emmanuel was pacing the dock, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing at the water. "No," Geondal said. A pause. "He's finally realizing what he lost. Let him have the whole night with it." He slid the phone back into his jacket, and then he added half to himself, watching the lights of the shore. "What he doesn't know is that none of this was a coincidence." Tiana didn't hear that part. She was looking at the fireworks, but her eyes drifted down to his wrist, and she noticed, for the first time, a thin, worn bracelet there, faded beads on a frayed string, handmade, the kind of thing a person keeps not because it's valuable, but because it can be replaced. She'd seen it before, 8 months ago, in the rain, on the wrist of a frightened woman she'd held out of a puddle in a crosswalk, whose hand she'd squeezed while she told her a silly story about a kid in her class who kept a pet rock named Kevin, just to keep her calm until the ambulance came. "Your bracelet," Tiana said slowly. Geondal glanced down at it. "She made it when I was 7. Told me as long as I wore it, I'd never be far from home." He turned it once on his wrist. "I gave it back to her that day in the hospital. She gave it back to me last week. She said, 'Hold on to it until you find the girl. Then you won't need it anymore. You'll be home.'" Tiana's breath caught, and the audience realizes all at once that the yacht was never the point. The gold letters were never the point. The point was a small act of kindness given freely to a stranger in the rain, and with no expectation, no camera, no audience, that came all the way back around, exactly when she'd convinced herself it never would. For 3 years, Tiana Okafor believed the worst thing about her was that she gave too much. Emmanuel taught her that. He made her feel like her kindness was a defect, something that made her easy to leave, easy to trade up from, easy to sit alone by a kitchen door and clap at. But kindness was never the flaw. Kindness was the reason a woman in a crosswalk got home to her son. Kindness was the reason the son spent 8 months searching for a name he was never given. And kindness was the reason that on the loneliest day she'd let herself feel in years, the entire ocean rearranged itself just to spell out that she was seen. She always said it comes back around. Everybody told her she was naive. And on the one day she finally decided to give something to herself. A $6 bunch of daisies and a table by the sea. The world finally paid the debt it owed her. If you believe kindness finds its way home, comment, "It comes back around," and I'll pin it to the top. And chapter 2 is coming soon because that phone call Geondal got on the deck. It's about the one person who didn't want Tiana found. I'll see you there.